Hi, everyone. Michelle Casati here with WPTV, and we are starting a discussion on a very important topic that we're talking about on air today as well, race and ethnicity as it pertains to Hispanics and Latinos. And we have several local key leaders, Latino and Hispanic leaders on this discussion as well. I want to introduce them. We have Santos Arroyo. He is the CEO and founder of the Florida Hispanic Chamber of Commerce with Palm Beach County. We have Maricela Torres, she's the interim news director for the Esperanza Center in West Palm Beach. Mirta Luaces, who's also an editor and writer for La Guia News. And Monica Magales, she is Brazilian and she works with us here at WPTV. She is an extraordinary web producer. And so we've brought all of these people together, different backgrounds, to have this discussion. I will say that in a few minutes, I will have to step off and go into the studio because we're also airing the story at the same time that we aired on here. But first, I wanted to welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure that we know that all of you who are watching on Facebook Live, you'll also to ask us questions, comment. We want to make sure that you participate as well. But first, I just want to start off by saying, race and ethnicity, a huge topic. And if one of you want to tackle the biggest, I guess, obstacle you face, trying to explain to people the difference between race and ethnicity.
Well, race actually is a social concept created to categorize people. There's no such really a definition of race based on biology or genetics. And that's my understanding as of today. So it's actually a way for governments to be able to identify people based pretty much on how they look on the outside, which create a lot of controversy.
And of course, ethnicity, as we know it, is where your cultural background, right? Where the part of the world where you're from. So ethnicity talks more about what country you're from, what your roots are. So there's people that always confuse those two. Before we get into further conversation, we are running the story on air right now. So I'm going to go into the studio and I want to make sure that you all get to see it on here as well at the same time. So I'll be back and feel free to continue the conversation while I'm in the studio to do this on air real quick.
All right.
Okay.
Bueno, sí, vamos a continuar la conversación in English, I guess, right? That's what she said. So
yes.
we're gonna keep it in that way. But I've been reading a lot about this issue about race and ethnicity in the United States and all over the world, and pretty much it's been created by people to categorize other communities, pretty much to have an idea of who's coming to a particular country from a particular area. For example, in 1952, that's when the laws changed in the United States, where anybody that wanted to be naturalized, I believe, as a U.S. citizen, the government stopped looking at what kind of race you belong to. And same in 1967, there was also a change in the law that allow interracial marriage that before wasn't allowed. So it's a very how you call it issue that it's a tough subject, and it's an issue that it creates a little bit of how you call it a debate. It's open to a debate, where people can have different ideas on how to.
Sorry, when you say that kind of brings up the fact that, to me, the differences in when we try to define the differences in race, that it also creates division, right? And it can be used by certain people in power to sort of set aside a group, whether it's a desirable group or not, and say, these are the traits of this race. And so we start forming an idea of racial identity based upon those conceptions.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that is true.
Well, politicians tend to change everything and make things more difficult for everybody. When I was in school many, many years ago, it was only 4 races. I don't know why they can still have 4 races and then ethnicity and where they can identify where do you come from. For example, when I was living in Texas and my kids were at school, they have on the race, they have Mexican American. Well, my kids were not Mexican American. If they were a Mexican American, I would be proud of that, but they are not Mexican American. It's just because Texas is with a lot of Mexican living in that area. That's what they assume, that everybody is Mexican American. The same thing happened in Miami. Miami, they assume that everybody is Cuban American. So
Yes. Like in Brazil, we have 5 options, and they are black, white, brown, Indian, and yellow. So not even there I know where I fit, It's like we are a mixed country. We have people from, all kinds of colors and backgrounds and, ethnicities. So it's complicated sometimes.
but who are the
But I
browns?
know that I do not fit in any box here.
I mean, when the first Cuban arrived in South Florida back in the early 60s, we were either Cuban exiles or Cuban refugees. Then they came with the Hispanics. We were Hispanic. We were not Cuban anymore. We were
Right.
Hispanic. And then now we are brown. Oh, suddenly we are not Hispanic anymore. We are brown.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know which box I would fit in Brazil. I would say, maybe I grew up thinking, okay, I'm white, but I'm not really white. So, but there was more like a conception of, okay, if you're not black, you're white. You know what I mean? So here it's like, I'm not white. I'm not, what am I?
Yes.
Well, if you're not white, why you're not white? Do you come from a mixed family, or are your
yes, I have
parents
a
white?
German background, and in Brazil, everyone has a little bit of everything. So African influence and German influence, and it's, all over the place. So we have people from, being like blonde, blue eyes to black, it's like, depending on, each state has different features, and it's complicated.
But we can go by the picture.
The point. I'm sorry. This raises the point. I think that clearly race is used by our politicians, by our local
Yes.
government, by our own group sometimes, or any group that has a competing interest to draw attention to whatever it is that they're trying to draw attention to.
Well, it's also used for
As
medical
Lisa
reasons,
mentioned.
like hospitals
Right.
and the health department also uses the race to identify, where they can gather X amount of information based on a sickness,
Yes.
And I'm
That's
glad
what
you
happened to COVID at one point.
joined me back again here from our little on studio presentation. But to that point, there is a reason. I know people ask this all the time, and today we got so many comments on Facebook. What does it matter? What's the reason why it matters to choose a race? It's because there's so many different types of statistics that we need to know how Hispanics are doing, right? We need to know how our minorities are doing. Are they getting what they need in the school system? Are they getting what they need economically in jobs? So it's very important. So I want to take this moment to go ahead and show you the story. I think we haven't been able to air it just yet on this StreamYard, on this Facebook Live. I want to go ahead and show everyone so we kind of know everybody's on the same page and know what we're talking about.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the word race as a category of humankind that shares certain distinctive physical traits.
Hi, I'm Christina Rue with another episode of Catalina Stars Young and Famous.
If you ask young podcaster Christina Aru her race,
At first, I only knew I was Cuban. And then when I learned I was Latina, I did not no, like I thought that meant I couldn't be Cuban anymore.
You won't hear her say Pacific Islander, white, black, or Asian, because in the race box, many Hispanics and Latinos are lost.
We're not a race. We are so different, and that's the problem too. We are so many countries, and you're trying to just bottle us up.
Christina's mom, Kathy Aru, a journalist and founder of Latina magazine Catalina, has battled with this topic since she started her magazine 10 years ago.
I called it Catalina because there was such a controversy on what to label ourselves. So I went with my name, Catherine, in Spanish.
The word Hispanic refers to people from Spanish-speaking countries, but Latina or Latino refers to people from Latin American countries who may speak Spanish, Portuguese, or other indigenous languages. Oftentimes, the two terms are mistakenly used interchangeably.
Words matter.
Associate professor at Florida Atlantic University, Dr. Cristobal Salinas, studies and researches social change on race and ethnicity. Salinas says the issue is complicated by the fact that Hispanic and Latino are an ethnicity and not a race.
So when it comes to the data collected, we have limited options. When we think about a race, we are either white, black, Asian American, Native American. We can choose one of those races, while Hispanic, Latino becomes an ethnicity. And I think that's where we struggle, many of us, is where do we fit in?
The health department director for Palm Beach County also noting the struggle in COVID-19 vaccine data collection. Reports show 4.4% of the total local population vaccinated is Hispanic, but 20% identified as unknown in the race category.
And then unknown are the people that can't decide which one of those they fit into, which is a lot of people in our county.
In some cases, choosing ethnicity is not even an option on a data collection form. And identifying race and ethnicity gets more complex in cases where Hispanics and Latinos can also identify as white or black. But what happens when you're in between?
My 11-year-old found a mug that it was a coffee mug, café con leche, and there were different colors. It went from pale to darker, and it depends how much milk you add to your coffee. And that's how we've been able to explain our colors in our family. But there are no boxes for that.
Salinas believes new words need to be introduced to the race box.
But I think we will eventually become a race. It's just a matter of time and who is making that decision for us.
And today I'm going to be interviewing a Latinx skateboarder, Steven Pinheiro.
It's going to take Hispanics and Latinos to use their voices to fit in the box.
But the decision makers aren't us.
Latinx.
Michelle Quesada, WPTV News Channel 5.
Okay, so just off the bat watching that, what are your thoughts in this, topic of trying to fit in the box? First of all, I want all of you to answer. Do you think we need to fit in the box? Monica, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
That's something that really never bothered me. Actually, I thought that was funny. I even had a joke with a friend of mine. I'm like, what am I? But it never really bothered me that much. So I know I'm Latin. I'm from a Latin country. Brazil is geographically a Latin country. So, that's what I think I am. So I'm always checking on other. So that's what
You're
it
just
is.
used to it already.
Huh?
You're just used to it already, checking other.
Yes, yeah. It's something that, well, these are the options, and that's the option that I have. I'm not Hispanic, I'm not, black, I'm not white, so I'm others.
Mirta, you have a lot of knowledge, how we have identified Hispanics in the United States for decades, especially in South Florida. Talk a little bit about how you feel about it. Do you think that we need to be labeled as a race, or do we just accept that?
No, I think we all belong to one race, which is the human race, and I don't think we should be labeled. I don't think there should be a label too, because sometimes it goes by your skin color or your language or where you're from or your ethnicity, your background. So it's kind of confusing, it's a little bit of a lot of things.
Absolutely. And we have a Facebook viewer, as you can see, Marlene Pfeiffer commenting that it's time we stop putting people in any boxes. just think about how much better life would be if we stopped categorizing people, unless there's a medical reason or some reason to, I guess.
Exactly. I totally agree with that.
Yes. I know you have a lot of knowledge covering this and labels and where Hispanics fall for many decades. What do you think about this, Mita?
Well, I don't want to be labeled as Latinx, that's for sure.
You don't want to be labeled Latinx?
No,
okay.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm white, Cuban, exile. I think we should be categorized by race. If we are going to be categorized by race, it should be the 4 race we did have when I was going to school. And then we can have the ethnicity to determine where we come from. Like my parents were from the Canary Islands, which is part of Spain. So I'm a European descendant. Okay, how should I label myself? White, brown, Hispanic, Latinx, how?
Yeah.
I think I am white and I am Cuban because that's my ethnicity, and because because we know what is happening in Cuba, I consider myself an exile.
I believe that we should go back to what other countries have done and still they're doing today, which is to have boxes for nationalities. Where are you coming from? If the purpose is to identify people in the United States as if you're coming from other countries in here, well, then let's make those boxes available. And the ones that are born in the United States, they're born in the United States regardless of what color they are. That's my opinion.
I think France doesn't do that since 1978. So they believe that all its citizens need to be treated the same, doesn't matter if you're black, white, or yellow,
And I think now, if you notice this last census, we were up in a census year in 2020. If you noticed how specific the government got in trying to narrow down ethnicity and race, I know if you look at an example, it said race, white, and it gave you exactly who is considered white, German, Irish, like all these different types of backgrounds. And the same thing for black. And then when it came to ethnicity, it wanted to know, okay, if you are Hispanic or Latino, which country do you come from, or can you write in your country? So the census got very specific this last 2020, this last census. But there's so many other applications that we come across day to day, whether it's your doctor's office or if you're filing for unemployment. And we know that basically the categories of fitting into a race is usually used for statistics, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter to me that I don't think I'm white or black? No, I'm Cuban, I'm Latina, I'm an American. That's how I feel. But I did also talk with our school district member, Alexandria Ayala. She's Latina as well. And I do want to run her perspective real quick for everybody to be able to get her opinion on this, because she couldn't be a part of this discussion. She really wanted to, but she's also a part of the City of West Palm Beach Race and Equity Task Force, which is, they're doing great work with that as well. So I want to make sure that we get Alexandria Ayala's opinion on here. We can take a listen to what she had to say.
There's a lot of monolithing of the Hispanic Latino community. Like, we all have the same interests, desires, goals, and cultural backgrounds. It is not the case, you know very well. We all come from different perspectives on how we view the world. Our countries have different political and social systems in place that make it so that we're not on the same page about what we would like to see on. And we saw that in the last election, very divided differences among our community. So there's so much to learn. For me, I think that the most important thing we can do is clarify what it means to each of us, what that word means to identify ourselves as Hispanics, Latinos, and as a community in general, but then also making sure that we are being accepting of what people would like to be referenced as, and not just putting people in a box.
And so just listening to her there, she talks about how even though the U.S. tries to categorically put us in this box of Hispanics, Latinos, that we are so different. Even saying I'm Latina doesn't mean that I'm specifically one country or another, or I have one culture versus another. If you all want to kind of just chime in on how different we really are depending on the country, that we just can't say, oh, you're Latina, so everybody's the same, because it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Marisela, do you want to tackle that? Just how talk a little bit about your background and how different it is from other countries.
Yeah, so I would consider myself, I'm Mexican, so my race is Mexican, and my ethnicity is Hispanic. I'm from a Spanish-speaking country, and but I do understand that even between Latinos, right, we have a difference between the word. Do you identify as Latina or Hispanic? And that is a little, I think that's complicated. I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to how we identify as. And really, that's just what's important. You can be Black, white, and be Latin or Latino, Latinx. I personally do not identify as a Latinx. And you know, my parents and family members that are older, different generations, they've never heard of that word, and neither have my friends in Mexico or other parts of the world. So I think it's a very American thing, and we need to be careful when we talk to others about labels. I think the younger generation, more educated generation, they're familiar with that, but I don't have a problem, you know, just saying todas, todos, and repeating whatever it is that I need to say. However, I do know that some people are very gender conscious, and I also want to be sensitive to that. But at the same time, the Spanish language we use, it's not gender neutral. So me speaking with an X for certain words doesn't make sense to me.
And we're going to get to the Latinx topic in a second. I know Mita also brought that up as well, but I just want to bring up this comment on Facebook from James Toon. He said, if you were to do people's DNA, I'm quite sure all of us are such a mix of so many things. There's no way to label anything. And that is so accurate. You know, a couple of years ago, I did 23andMe, and I have so many different backgrounds. You know, I'm a little darker skinned than my best friend, who's Cuban and very pale. And yet when she did her DNA, I found out she was more African than I am. So it's just like the color of your skin doesn't mean anything. There's so much makeup going on, you know, inside of us, different mixes inside of us. And Santos, you alluded to that earlier, that, you know, race is something that we made up socially just to classify things. It doesn't mean anything. Right. It's just for us to visually like be able to identify, oh, this person's white, this person's Black, this person must be mixed, you know, and it's like, does it matter at the end of the day?
No, actually, what matters is how people feel. And what I have noticed over the years, you know, doing the events like Fiesta de Pueblo that brings together all 21 Hispanic countries, is that every single Hispanic person is proud from where they're from. They're proud of their country of origin. Even the people that are born in New York City, for example, Puerto Ricans that call themselves New Yorkers. Well, some people, even though they're born in New York, they feel 100% Puerto Ricans. And if there's a box for Puerto Ricans, they're going to mark Puerto Rican on that census box. I guarantee you that one. So it's based on how people feel. If you feel more European, you're proud where your family is from Germany, England, that's what you're going to mark. Germany or England. I don't believe in categorizing people by color at all.
And I understand completely. Monica, you said you wanted to.
No, I totally agree with that. I think it's time to simplify things and unite people and not divide like this. So I think that's what we need right now. Stop classifying people by color, and and just we are just one race, the human race, and that's it.
Yep. And before we get to the Latinx conversation, I just kind of want to tie this up. What do you think is the solution here? I mean, I know that our government is still going to try to collect statistics. I know that, the racial component of these types of surveys and applications matter in a lot of things, and gathering data and knowing, is there enough going, are there inequalities in many things that our government provides for us or helps us with, so what do you think is a solution? There should be a write-in box in the race section. Is that what you think we should do?
I think it should be an option for the individual to, say, maybe geographically where you're from, but not, you don't have to check a box and say, I'm Black or I'm white. I don't think that's
geography. as a way to identify people?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Great. And so Latinx, obviously a very controversial term that we have been hearing a lot lately, about lately. We're running a story tonight at 11 p.m. on Channel 5, so make sure if you're interested in the topic, you watch it as well. So that it's a new term, well, not too new. It's been around for a couple of years, but it's really emerging in the younger generations. And tonight at 11 we'll show some research too about who is actually using this term and whether or not Latinos have even heard about it. But off the bat, we already had some feelings about it. I know Mita immediately was like, "I'm not Latinx."
No, I'm not Latinx. But
tell me how you.
one solution.
I'm not either.
Like Monica said, one solution could be eliminate the race and classify people by ethnicity, and eliminate the race. But we have to know the ethnicity of the people that are here, because for a lot of purposes, even medical ones.
Correct.
Santos, how do you feel about Latinx?
Well, I empathize with them, but I don't consider myself a Latinx. I consider myself a Puerto Rican and living in the United States of America.
And first of all, and I should probably explain this too, because we have people joining in on the conversation who probably have never heard Latinx, and they're like, "What in the world is that?" So Latinx is a term which I don't know if any of you can really say where this term was born, who made this up, but it has caught on for some of the younger Latinas and Latinos. And basically, Latinx is a term used to describe people from Latin America, but without referencing gender. So it's a gender neutral term. So you're not saying Latina or Latino, we're Latinxes. We're not. And there was an interesting topic, an interesting point that the magazine editor I interviewed for my story that you saw a little while ago brought up, that why she told me, why, if we're 5 Latinas in a room and one Latino walks in, a man walks in who's Latino, we're all Latinos now, we're not Latinas. So there's obviously some issues with some people with the language, and the Spanish language is very dominant in the masculinity. So we can talk a little bit about that and how you feel about it. I know Mita says it doesn't bother her; she's fine with not referencing Latinx. Santos, you're not really into Latinx either. What about you, Maricela? How do you feel about Latinx?
For me, or
well,
go ahead, Maricela.
So I identify as Hispanic, so I don't identify as Latina. So for me, that word doesn't apply. And I know that it's gender neutral and supposed to be binary, right? Non-binary, I'm sorry. And my understanding of the term is that it came about because we want to be inclusive of others who are very gender sensitive. And I want to be sensitive to their identity and their pronouns. But our language, the Spanish language, is that way. And we have a beautiful language. And I don't find it, there's so much beauty there. And I think that there's just something else that we can find another solution than making up a word that I don't identify with, and I don't want to put an X to indicate whether it's female, male. That just bothers me. I get very passionate about it. Actually, it really is not something that I identify with. And again, friends of mine living in Mexico or other parts of the world that are Spanish speakers have no idea what this word means. They're confused.
Yeah, it hasn't gained popularity just yet. It's not a widespread term. I think the goal of Latinx is to be inclusive of everybody, no matter, how they feel about their gender. And obviously we've seen that evolve with LGBTQ and all these other groups. So I feel like, for me personally, Latinx doesn't bother me at all. To me, at the end of the day, I'm Latina, I'm Hispanic, I'm Cuban. That's kind of, and I'm American first and foremost. I was born in the United States. But when you go back to talking about your roots, people look at me and they can tell that I'm not Caucasian, I'm not white. So I have to kind of explain, well, I'm Cuban, but I was born in the United States, but my parents and my grandparents were from Cuba, so I grew up immersed in the Cuban culture. So I feel more Cuban than anything as far as the music, the food, and everything that I'm into. But at the same time, I was born in America. I'm a true American, and I love this country. And I feel like most of us feel the same way. Those of us who were born here or moved here and had to leave their countries. So at the end of the day, you know, to me, it's like we have so many different terms people feel comfortable with, and one of the things that we take away from this is that we shouldn't assume, right? That just because you see a Latina or Hispanic looking person, you shouldn't assume they're Mexican or Guatemalan or Cuban, because we get offended, right? The same way people get offended if you mispronounce their name and you say there's some, you know, from a different name, or they're from somewhere else, you get offended. You're like, well, no, actually, you know, this is my background. Do you all feel the same way? I feel like, you know, at the end of the day, we all just kind of want to represent our roots.
That's right. Yes.
Well, I appreciate you all so much. I know that we have a ton of comments and a lot of controversy on this topic, and I accept all of it. I think the only way we can kind of air these things out is talking about them. You know, the 4-letter word race is pretty scary for people to talk about a lot of times, and I'm not sure why. You know, if we were more open about it, there would be less biases, there would be less discrimination if we just kind of heard people's thoughts and heard about how they felt. So I really appreciate all of you so much. Don't forget, today at 11 o'clock on Channel 5, we're airing a Latinx story, and we'll get to hear the different perspective of why some people are trying to embrace Latinx. Thank you all again. I appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You
Bye-bye.
too.